For centuries, humanity has built an invisible hierarchy, a pyramid with itself at the very top. The reason we called it placed us above all other life on the planet, which was driven solely by instinct. But what if this division, this clean line we drew in the sand, was never so clear? This is the story of a silent revolution, one that began not in a sterile laboratory, but deep within the forests of Africa. It started with a simple, yet profoundly uncomfortable question. Are we really that different from other animals? In the 1950s, the world of science was a fortress of rigid rules, strict hierarchies, and a clinical detachment from emotion. It was a world dominated by men in white coats, where data was king and feelings were noise. Into this rigid landscape walked a young woman without a traditional university degree, but armed with something far rarer: boundless patience, a keen eye for detail, and a genuine, unshakable curiosity. Jane Goodall didn't enter the scientific establishment through the front door. Instead, she quietly and methodically began to redesign it from the inside out. Her journey would not only challenge what we knew about our closest living relatives, but also force us to question the very definition of what it means to be human. Her laboratory was not made of concrete and steel, but of leaves, earth, and sky. The Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania became her sanctuary and her place of study. Instead of cages or artificial enclosures, Jane chose direct patient observation in the wild. She broke the cardinal rule of her time, which demanded absolute emotional distance and non-interference. For days, weeks, and months, she simply watched. And from this patient vigil, something extraordinary began to emerge. The chimpanzees were not just a chaotic group of animals, they were a society. She witnessed complex social relationships, moments of cooperation and conflict, sophisticated communication, and even gestures that looked undeniably like compassion and empathy. The forest was revealing secrets that a laboratory never could. The scientific community had a strict protocol: never give your subjects names. Names create emotional bonds, and bonds compromise objectivity. Jane did the opposite. She gave them names: David Greybeard, Goliath, Flo. What was initially dismissed as a catastrophic methodological flaw, a sign of amateur sentimentality, became one of the greatest revolutions in modern ethology. By naming them, she stopped seeing a blur of primates and started perceiving individuals. She saw their unique stories unfold, their distinct personalities, their family dynamics, their rivalries, and their alliances. A name transformed an anonymous subject into a character in a living drama. This simple act of humanization allowed her to see a depth and complexity in their lives that no numbered chart could ever capture. For as long as we had told stories about ourselves, the use and creation of tools was the signature of humanity. It was the definitive line that separated Homo sapiens from the rest of the animal kingdom. Then, one day in Gombe, Jane saw something that sent shockwaves through the scientific world. She observed David Greybeard strip leaves from a twig and use it to fish for termites. It was a tool, made and used with purpose. Her mentor, Louis Leakey, famously cabled, "Now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as humans." This discovery was just the beginning. She would go on to document learned behaviors passed from one generation to the next. Clear evidence of social learning, and even distinct cultural variations between different chimpanzee groups. It wasn't just instinct. It was something deeper, something we had long reserved only for ourselves. The reaction from the established scientific community was swift and severe. Her findings were met with skepticism, criticism, and outright rejection. She was accused of anthropomorphism, of projecting human emotions onto animals. Her methods were deemed unscientific, her conclusions sentimental. She was a woman in a man's world, an outsider without the proper credentials, daring to question the foundational beliefs of anthropology and biology. They attacked her not only for her science, but for who she was. Her journey highlights a difficult truth. The history of science is not just a story of discovery, but also a history of fierce resistance to ideas that challenge the status quo. But her work could not be ignored. As the evidence mounted, it became impossible to deny the profound implications of her discoveries. If other animals feel, learn, have social structures, and experience something akin to emotions, then how should we study them? How can we justify keeping them in barren cages for research? Jane Goodall's work was the catalyst for a new ethical consciousness in science. Her findings led directly to the development of new research protocols that emphasized animal well-being. The very language of science began to shift from cold, subjectifying terms to a more respectful and accurate description of animal lives. The revolution that began in the forest had now reached the heart of the scientific establishment. With understanding came a heavy sense of responsibility. It was no longer enough to simply observe and document. Seeing the chimpanzees' world threatened by deforestation and poaching, Jane realized that her research demanded action. The scientist had to become an advocate. Observation alone was not enough. It had to lead to conservation. She founded the Jane Goodall Institute, turning her focus to habitat protection, environmental education, and empowering local communities to become stewards of their own environment. Science, which had once prided itself on detachment, had now met ethics and found its moral compass. The observer became a guardian. So, we return to our original question. Are we animals? Perhaps the question was never about what separates us, but about what connects us. The line we drew between reason and instinct, between human and animal, has become increasingly blurred. Consciousness, affection, learning, culture, cooperation, grief. Jane Goodall's work holds up a mirror to humanity, and in the reflection of the chimpanzee's gaze, we are forced to recognize something undeniably familiar. We see a shared evolutionary heritage, a common spark of intelligence and emotion. The boundary we so carefully constructed may never have truly existed at all. The legacy of Jane Goodall is far more than a collection of scientific papers. It is a fundamental shift in mindset. It has changed textbooks, influenced laws protecting animals, and inspired educational projects around the globe. Most importantly, it has transformed the way humanity perceives itself, not as a ruler standing apart from nature, but as an integral part of the intricate web of life. She gave us a new story to tell ourselves, a new way of understanding our place on this planet. And so, the question remains open. It is no longer just a scientific provocation, but a profound ethical challenge for our time. If we are indeed part of the animal kingdom, not above it, but within it, then what is our duty to the rest of life on Earth? What responsibility does our unique consciousness and power confer upon us? The future is looking back at us, and the answer we choose will define our humanity. If this documentary expanded the way you see science, nature, and yourself, please like this video and share it with others who appreciate knowledge and reflection. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the great ideas that shape our world. Thank you for watching.